Was there a, next one, index slide of the topics today? Okay, great. Thank you. Now that the technical issues are somewhat abated, topics we're going to cover today include an overview of fundraising, who the OUUC financial consulting team is, who they are and what they do. We'll do an overview of our assets, the status of our debt, and then a good overview of the revenues, expenses, and we're going to talk about endowment and reserve funds. And then we will be open to take your questions. Where's not a hand? Okay, so those of you with more questions of a specific financial nature can ask Jeff. Bigger questions, the whys and hows, you can ask me or anyone on the board. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide, please. My name's Arlene Colwick. I'm the president of the board. So for in a business, if you have a downturn in the economy, or your sales, you're not selling as many hamburgers at the McDonald's you own, you either have to get more customers and sell more hamburgers to get more money to pay your staff and expand, or you have to reduce your staff or perhaps look at reducing your hours or some other thing to live within your means. Most folks, I've never seen a McDonald's close. McDonald's just keeps expanding. They are a business set for growth. And I think OUUC is, we're a nonprofit that is set for growth. We are meeting a very important need in our community. So we have a stewardship drive to fund the operating expenses every year, keeping the lights on, keeping the staff paid, buying copy paper, buying computers, replacing carts that break, dishes in the, paying the heating bills, general maintenance around the grounds, having to cut down a tree or do the storm pond maintenance every year. Those are included in our operating expenses. We have capital campaigns for long-term major maintenance and projects. We just had a big capital campaign. These are things related to the building. Legacy gifts are those gifts. They can go a couple of places when this is for folks who are leaving something to OUUC in their wills, or a living gift. They're intending to distribute their wealth while they're still alive. And we have a couple of options for that, the endowment and other unrestricted gifts. And we'll be talking about those specific kinds of gifts when Jeff takes over the presentation. Okay, you can go on to the next slide. Okay, I call these hiccups because our latest stewardship drive did not meet the goal that we set for ourselves. And the goal was set on growth, modest growth for the operations at OUUC, modest growth. We didn't meet the goals for modest growth. And some of the things that may have contributed to that are our changeover to a new fiscal year meant that we had, within the last 2 or 3 years, a stewardship drive for 1 full year, a stewardship drive for half a year, and then the following stewardship drive was for a full year that went from July to June. And then that first year of the July to June year, in the fall, the heat pumps, the furnaces broke down. So we needed to replace a large operating a large maintenance expense quickly. So we had a capital drive that happened in the fall. Well, some folks got mixed up and thought the fall drive was the fall stewardship drive. So when we came back in March to say, okay, now we need money for operations for next year, July to June, they said, but I already gave. Or there were folks also who may have had difficulty with the pledging being entirely online. And folks who had trouble pledging and knew that they could go to Darlene and Darlene could help log them in and record their pledge for them. Lots of folks don't know that that resource is available. Lots of folks are attending completely online and don't jump in their cars to come over here in business hours for Darlene to help them. So they just didn't pledge. Or they're waiting to pledge once someone can help them. All right, we have an assumption of computer literacy in the congregation that may not, lots of folks can be computer literate. I know I had to become more computer literate and I'm still working. A lot of folks are really computer literate when their grandkids are over for a visit, and not so much when their grandkids go home. We couldn't figure out how to get all the grandkids to visit during stewardship drive to help everyone who needed help. So also the fundraising campaigns were named these great, beautiful things: funding our future, enhancing our,
Extending our reach.
extending our reach. If I wanted to go pledge for my annual pledge, which one do I pick? Something needed to say pledge, something needed to say capital in the tile that we click. Once we get there, we need to know that we have to drop down and make a choice. And then we have to know also, go ahead to the next slide. Can we bring up the bottom of the screen a little bit? Well, some folks assume that in error that last year's pledge will repeat with no action taken. And that's not true. Pledges and monthly payments are an opt-in. You have to sign up every year. It's not like Netflix where you have to cancel it. You have to sign in every year. It's like banking. And that's why the site has more steps. We want to make sure it's your money, so it has to be on banking security type things. So one reason some folks didn't pledge was they assumed that last year's pledge will repeat with no action taken on their behalf. Or they will go in, make their pledge, and not do the last couple steps, which is going to the site and saying, okay, I want to push this button to have it taken out monthly, and I want it to start this month and end this month, and here's my total, and then yes, I approve. There's a lot of buttons to push. Again, where are those grandkids when you need them? Another thing that sometimes can happen on debt, the pledge is not directed to be paid from the estate. This makes a big difference when the congregant who dies was a large donor. The same when a congregant moves away and does not fulfill the balance of the pledge. That's another, just a minor hiccup that could happen. It's not a problem at this congregation currently. So we can go ahead to the next slide. So here's one of our hurdles. When we have a pledge drive and we come up with the money just enough to sustain our institutional core, just to keep things exactly as they were, or just try and make the same as we had last year and we'll be okay. Then if there's money left over, we can do some more outreach, do some innovation, add services, add tech, add staff. This doesn't appeal to the new folks who are joining us because they're coming to us for the mission, the outreach, the services, and the innovation. The folks who are attending online by choice are not here. They're not cold in the sanctuary. They're not coming by the office and seeing the 3 sweaters that Reverend Mary is wearing and the 4 coats that Darlene's wearing, right? They don't see it. So I just wanted to bring up that our fundraising has to match our vision rather than just our finances. Are there any questions at this point about that? Yes.
I wanted to make one little addition to your first slide.
Turned on.
Oh. Hi, this is Gail. I'm Gail Reedy. On your first slide, when you talk about stewardship, since I've been working on the auction, people have lots of questions. The auction and half of the share of the plate are actually part of stewardship. So in your future slides, could you include those 2 items? Because it's the same confusion that people have about stewardship and capital campaign. They don't understand why I'm being asked to pledge because I'm giving to the auction and I'm giving to the share of the plate. And so we just have not shown a complete picture that it takes all of that money to do the stewardship. It's all part of stewardship. So
it does, but the budget is not based on we don't plan on money from the auction because we don't know how much.
Yes,
we're
you
getting.
do. Yes, you do.
Yes, you do.
Yes, we do. It's in there.
Those questions are for Jeff.
Okay.
For later.
I'm just saying, please
Thank
add
you.
that. That's all I'm asking.
Okay. Next slide.
Maybe. Oops.
All right. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Arlene. So I'm Jeff Bowles. I'm the treasurer. I've been treasurer for about 10 months or so. And I was really glad to see so many people. There's 28 people online, I think, another 15 here. So many candidates to be the next treasurer. I really appreciate that interest. So this is the fun part. Can you go back a slide? Actually, 2 slides. Go back 1 more, please. Okay, so there's a OUC financial consulting team, and we meet once a month. And the team consists of Reverend Mary, he is treasurer, Gregory Robinson, who many of you know. Gregory is he's not here, so I can say it's a finance geek. So it's really good. He knows accounting. He's had a career in nonprofits. So he knows accounting much more than I do, and I learn a lot from him. So he's a valuable addition. Darlene's there because she basically knows everything that's going on. And we have outside bookkeepers who have been invaluable to the congregation. Because of Zoom technology, they don't have to be there in person. They are actually based in Texas, Gateway Bookkeeping. So we meet once a week, and I'll get into this a little bit. I'll show you what we do. So next slide, please. So there's other resources for finance people. There's a number of books Darlene has recommended. These are the ones that I have at our house. And actually, my wife was treasurer for a number of years, and she got all these. And one of them is the tax guide. If we get bigger, we start renting out space, we have to worry much more about taxes than we do now. So it's important that we pay attention to that, but there's lots of help around there. And then there's a blog, UU Money Digest. And it comes out, it says volume 241, issue 38. So you know how many of these there are. But 10 times a week, I get an email from this, and they have multiple questions, and UU treasurers from all over the country weigh in on this. And there's lots of real issues. We have a couple of former OUC treasurers that are now treasurers in other places, so they must have enjoyed it somehow. Some of the questions that are posed there are really important. I mean, so we've had questions like, if someone gives the minister frequent flyer miles to go to GA, is that taxable to the minister? No. How much should we discount pledges for budgeting purposes? You know, you get a pledge of 500,000. How much should we budget for? And the answer is, it depends. Some churches say 0, like we used to do. Some say up to 9 or 10%. Most of them seem to discount it 4 or 5% in there. Should we have separate bank accounts for restricted accounts? No, don't need that. And this is my favorite. Is a yoga retreat in Mexico an acceptable professional expense for a minister to be reimbursed?
Yeah.
The answers were, that's the board issue. That's not the question. So, next slide, please. So we have a number of accounts, and our main banker now is Twin Star Credit Union. We switched there, I don't know, 8 months ago, 9 months ago, and it's been great. We had less than, I would say, satisfactory service from Key Bank. We can elaborate on that afterwards if you want. However, we still have some money in Key Bank in the checking account because we have a loan from Key Bank, and according to the terms of our loan, we have to pay it out of the checking account. So we leave enough money in our checking account to pay our loan payments, and everything else is in Twin Star Credit Union. We have checking accounts. We actually have 3. We have the main checking account that we use on a day-to-day basis. We have Reverend Mary has her minister's discretionary fund in a separate account. And then Susan Dodson, who raises a lot of money for the church with her eBay sales, has a separate account that she puts money into as she makes money from eBay. Then we also have, frankly, a fair amount of money. We had a capital campaign. We had the Lanning bequest. We had the Lanning gift. There's a lot of cash sitting around waiting to be spent. So we can park it in the checking account and get 0 interest. We can park it in the savings account and get about 0.5% interest. Or we can put some of it in a money market account, which we've done to earn 1% interest. But we still have a lot of money. So $250,000 is in CDs at 4%. And they mature July 31st. And so we will get out of that about $6,000 we're putting it in for that amount. So now we can get it out if we need it, but we probably won't need it till July because the stuff in the money market fund will cover we hope all the contracts expenses. And then we have an endowment fund which we'll get to in a minute. So next slide, please. We have, as we say, we actually have 2 loans. We have our main loan is from our larger loan is from Key Bank. It's 5% interest rate, loan period of 10 years. The last payment is scheduled for March of 2028. Our monthly payment is $27.67. So that's a fair amount of money over a course of a year. It's about $33,000. Now recall that one of the purposes of the capital campaign was to raise enough money to pay that down in one way or another. So if we pay that down, we will then have available for operating expenses $33,004 a year. Next slide, please. We also have a member loan, a generous member loan that is almost over. The last payment is due 12/1/2023, and there the monthly payment is $20,000 a year. So in the next fiscal year, we would still owe $10,000. Again, we could pay that off and use that money on an ongoing basis for operating expenses or whatever we want to spend it on. Next slide, please. So we review the financial consulting team gets about a 60-page document every month from Paveway bookkeepers, and about 4 pages are in 2-point font. And since we're in here, I couldn't really display all of that, and nor would you want to put up with that. But I just use, this is a snippet of one of the documents that they provide us. And it basically allows us to track how we're doing as the year goes on. You know, a budget is just is a plan. A budget is a plan for spending, a plan for raising money, and a plan to make them come out relatively equal at the end. But you know, types of revenues, new revenue sources come up during the year, and old revenue sources aren't as productive during the year. New expenses come up, some expenses aren't necessary. So it's just a plan, and it's adapted over time. And so what we try to do is make them is plan to make sure we aren't, you know, falling off a cliff, that we have enough money. If we need to cut expenses mid-year, we can, etc. So budgets, for example, this is as of February 28th, the March document will come out about Tuesday of this coming week. So this is a little bit out of date. But as of into February, which is 4 months left in the fiscal year, we had received $342,000 in pledge payments. We're budgeting to receive for the whole year $439,000. Now remember, that's not the pledge number. Pledge number is $450,000 or something like that, and because it's discounted a few percent. But we budgeted to receive $439,000. The annual budget remaining is $97,000. So what does that mean? Well, that means that over the next 4 months, to meet our budget, we have to receive just under $100,000 or just under $25,000 a month. So last month, we received $27,000. Month before that, we received like $29,000. Now, pledge payments come in lumps. Some people repay their pledge. Some people pay right at the end of the calendar year for tax purposes. So it's as much art as science in figuring this out. But I'd say this is fairly hopeful, although caveat, there's a number of members who have pledged, members and friends who have pledged and haven't paid any part of their pledges. But reminders just went out. We'll follow up with phone calls. E-sales, that's kind of right on track. 3 months left in the year. We have $3,000 left to collect. If that's a straight line thing, and it generally has been, that's good. The auction, of course, is lumpy. It all comes in at the tail end. So we're hoping that the auction will get $20,000, and that, you know, if it doesn't, then we could have a little bit of a shortfall. But last year got 25, so it's hard to tell. So make sure you go online and bid for the Valentine's Day event. Interest income, we budgeted 0, but this number is going to be about $5,000 for this year. Building use, we budgeted 0, but we received 2,365. I have no idea what that is from. And then share the plate, again, is coming in fairly on track. So we're coming in fairly on track with all this. But we'll just have to see it with the last few months bring. So the next slide. We do the same thing for expenses, and this is a little bit more complicated and hard because expenses also come in lumps. I mean, and they change. We have, for example, change. It's budgeted for a certain number of full-time employees and a certain number of hourly employees. And the full-time employees get a bigger set of benefits than the others. And that mix has changed over the year. There's more hourly employees, fewer full-time. So that change. But overall, compensation and benefits has been pretty much on track. We also have these other categories, which I don't want to get into for lack of time. But these are the things that we would monitor each month in our financial consulting team meetings and call out. Usually I say, wait a second, this is, you know, this seems way too high to me. And then Mary says, no, it's not. And she explains why. And Gregory says, well, you just don't understand accounting. And then he corrects me, and then we move on. So then next slide, please. So we have an endowment, and this is what it says in the OUUC website. This is accurate. It's a special account that will generate revenue to enhance the congregation's ministry and mission in the future. Next slide. We've had this endowment for, I don't know, 20 years, something like that. And we haven't drawn a penny from it. It's kind of been, you know, stock market goes up and down. People donate, then for a long time, no one donates. The current balance is $435,000 plus. It's a little bit inaccurate because there's still, I think, 1,300 sitting in our account to be transferred. We don't transfer every nickel and dime that comes in for the endowment. We wait till there's like at least $1,000. So we have about 435,000. The current policy says we don't start drawing until it hits 500,000. But we're considering an amendment to that because at least I think it's time to start showing this asset off to the OUC community. But it is something to probably be we get the February number, we get the March number early next week, and I'll bet it's going to be about 450 because the stock market has tweaked up a little bit since then. Next slide, please. We have this with the Unitarian Universalist Common Endowment Fund. That's where it's invested. Now, it was invested somewhere else before this, but since I've been treasurer, it's been here. It's been here for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, I think. A lot of congregations have it there. The total fund is 232 million, which is endowments go. Harvard's like 100 million or something. And so this is not. The University of Washington is 4.7 billion. Whitman College is 890 million. So but about 40% of that 232 is held by the UUA itself, and they draw out of that fund, and they draw 4.5% of that amount for their operating expenses. Now, the 15-year gross return has been 5.4%, not including fees. So the actual return is about 4.5, 4.6. Now, if we'd done this presentation a year ago, or I'm sorry, 3 years ago, we would have said our annual return for 15 years was 8.5%. So the stock market took a hit. And that's true with all endowments. I mean, that's just not all endowments. We took, we had a monthly call, a quarterly call with the UCEF that I listened to, and Diana, I think, has listened to a couple of times. Diana is the chair of the Legacy Giving Committee that oversees the policy and all this. And their returns are lower than a lot of endowments. For example, the last fiscal year, this UCEM lost 11.6%. The University of Washington lost 5.5%. So good news. We lost 5.5% of 4.7 billion. But this was chosen because of what they're investing in, and there is socially responsible investing, and they feel good about it. And every time of these monthly calls, they go over that. And so it is very intentional. Some of the investments are in fairly low return investments, and that is not just acceptable, but that is part of the mission. So we have to decide. We could invest in the, the defense industry, probably make a lot more money, but we aren't going to do that. Next, please. So here's the sort of the UUCEF key characteristics: diversified, long-term investment, professionally managed, and is open to OUC congregations. Now, not all UU congregations invest here. Some invest various other places, but generally always in some socially responsible way. Next slide, please. So the endowment policy currently allows for endowment, draws from the endowment for special projects. We have an amendment we're considering and proposing that would allow draws for operating expenses under certain circumstances, certain financial circumstances. So and the board is considering that. So next slide. So I wanted to mention about how the endowment works, because there's a misconception. Some people will say, oh, we have an endowment, we only spend the interest. And that's not right for a couple of reasons. Not complete, the concept is correct. But first of all, endowment funds don't earn very much interest. They hold bonds and they get interest from that, but they own stocks, they own equities. And the gain from those is not interest, it's dividends, or it's gain in this value of the stocks. So it's really the overall gain that we're interested in. Some comes from interest, some comes from dividends, some comes from the stock gain. But what you don't want to do is just spend the gain, because then, like the University of Washington, they had lost a bunch, 5% one year, so you spend nothing. And a couple years before that, they gained 15%. So you spend 15% of $4.7 billion 1 year and nothing the next. That's not the way organizations want their endowments to work. You want it to be levelized. So what you do, this is fairly standard, there's lots of formula, but the one that we have, and this is fairly standard among college and university and church endowments, by the way, we looked at a lot of them. You take the average of the 12 quarters, and then you multiply that by your draw amount. So for us, if we assume the end of Q1 2023, 12 quarters, the average would be about 405,000. Current balance is about 435, but the average is about 405. If we want to have our draw at 4%, that would give us slightly over $16,000 for use by the church, whether it be for operating expenses if the policy changes, or whether it be for special project. Next slide, please. So all of this is not just, you aren't just relying on, the board and the treasurer and the financial consulting committee. There's a state law overlay on all of this. There's a Prudent Management of Institutional Funds Act. And I just got a couple of, I've been going to put it all up on the screen or bore you with it all, but basically, we have some limitations. And one of the limitations we have is if you raise money for a special purpose, and the donor gives with that purpose in mind, you can't just spend it on something else, willy-nilly spend it on something else. So capital campaign, take a capital campaign, there are specific purposes. And the purpose was to pay down debt. Purpose was to fund the furnaces. Purpose was to restore some of the depleted reserves and also some of the reserve projects. So if the board said, no, we really need a retreat and a good one, you can't do it.
Yoga in Mexico.
For the whole board, you can't do it. And otherwise we're in violation of state law, not to mention the trust of the congregation. So the next slide. Please, thanks. And there's a duty of care. So if you're managing and investing institutional funds, which ours are, you have to do it in good faith and with the care an ordinarily prudent person in a like position would exercise under similar circumstances. So endowment, our reserve funds, we aren't going to the casino and letting it ride on black. We aren't investing in Bitcoin, it's got to be prudently, and we always interpret that relatively safe investments. So next slide, please. So we also have, we're getting to the end, but we also have reserve funds, and a reserve fund is an account or other asset to meet future costs or financial obligations. Now, we have lots of reserve funds, probably more than we should have. We're trying to shrink them down, but all organizations have reserve funds. In your personal lives, you probably have reserve funds. You mentally put away, you're in a new car, we're going to put some money aside, maybe even in a separate account, and save it for the future. And so one of the types of operating expenses is you need some sort of operating reserve. You have money just in case something happens. It could be any number of things that can happen. It could be that furnaces go out. It could be the pledges all of a sudden drop off the map. People move and you don't get that sort of pledges back. It could be, there's an accident at the church. Someone gets injured, they get sued. It's not all covered by insurance, and we have to hire lawyers. So there's unexpected stuff. Now, one of the church finance books that I had a picture of before suggests 3 months of operating cash reserves plus current liabilities. That's a sound one. A strong one would be double that. So that's a lot of money in our case. We have a $500,000 budget. So next slide, please. So we currently have there's reserves that are unrestricted, meaning we can go use them without restrictions, not worrying about donor intent or anything. And we have got a couple. One is a general operating reserve, and that's set at 5%, and that's been, I think, always been 5%, or it's been 5% for a good long time. That's at 27,700. We also have a general operating fund. It's what it's called. It's a reserve. It's just money that we have around. It's 79,000, almost 80,000, and we could tap that for many things if we had some unexpected expenses. And then there's some more special purpose reserves. We have a sabbatical reserve that we need to build up because every X number of years the minister by contract, and not just contract, but also is entitled to have a sabbatical. And so we want to be able to cover that while she's gone.
Sure.
Yeah.
You said 3 months or 6 months, so.
Yeah.
Where do we fall on our results?
Well, it's a little bit, we're at the lower end of that for sure. But it's a little unclear to me. Let's go to the next slide. You'll see also what I mean. There's other reserves that we have. So for example, if the problem is something fails and we're past the furnaces, but an example would be the ductwork. Now, we did ductwork before the furnaces, and that was for COVID purposes. And we had a building major maintenance fund, which at that time was about 50,000, I believe, and we had to spend about 34,000 of that. And you know, that could happen again. You know, our hot water heaters, I'm thinking of personal, you know, unexpected things. Our hot water heater could fail, you know, our roof could fail. That's happened in our personal lives. And you want to have money available in the building major maintenance fund. So we have more than just those operating reserves, but it's not, you know, some people might say we're still a little bit on the shy end, but I gotta say, compared to a lot of churches, we're really good. And compared to this church, with, you know, when we moved to, after we moved into this building, I say 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we are in really good shape compared to that time. I mean, reserves, and what are those? We also have a couple of smaller ones, Faith in Action, and then we have large ones, and those are basically places where we park our money for the capital campaign, the money that's come in, and the legacy gifts, which has been, it's essential, mostly, not all, the Lanning gift and bequest. Next slide, please. And then we have some smaller ones. Someone gave $2,000 to pay off a mortgage, so you park that, and we'll use that. There's a ministerial transition, which is used for various purposes when, and we save money for that. And then there's a whole bunch of smaller reserves. You know, in the past, you know, if the I remember middle school group used to sell gingerbread houses. Remember those? Yeah, $25. And you know, and you buy a gingerbread house, and the money would go to the middle school group. It would be intended to pay for the middle school trip. So you park that money in a separate account, and then that money, not a separate bank account, but a separate account in the books. And that money then would be used to send the kids to Portland. And so we have a number of those, and we have smaller special purpose ones. We have each of the ministries has a small reserve. There's a partner church one. There's a auction community fund for people that need to be some assistance to attend the auction. And there's some various other ones that are, you know, I mean, I don't say nickel and dime because some of them are hundreds of dollars, maybe even thousands, but there's a whole list, and I want to list them all. And we're working to try to consolidate those and eliminate some. We used to have a snow removal fund, and you know, that seems kind of silly because you wanted, rather than having a separate fund for each possible disaster, you know, you just lump them all together, and it's a disaster fund. Yeah. So next slide, please. Oh, that's it. So I want to thank you for attending. It's not that many people are so interested in this minutia, and I always had this concern that instead of a board Sunday, it's BOARD, it would be board BORED. But any other questions? I'm betting there's one online, but I don't know.
If you do have a question online, please type it in the chat and I'll relay it.
I was just wondering. That's on?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Number one, if we look 5 years ahead, do we have a sense of direction that we're headed? Up, down, in the middle? And that's my question.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think a number of many organizations have that requirement. Actually, at the last board meeting, we talked about doing just that, but where we're going to, I mean, we're always thinking about it, you know. But as far as saying, is there a document that says 5-year plan for 5-year financial plan for OUC? Reverend Mary actually is going to grow. See, this always happens.
Jeff, I'm just gonna add to what you had to say. which is, we have a 30-year plan for the capital expenses. That's what the reserve study was for, is this is what, sorry. The capital reserve study was to say, this is what the building expenses are gonna look like for the next 30 years. So I would say a good chunk of that work has already been done with the reserve study. On the operations side, we can say, you know, this is how much expenses tend to go up. This is what we think staffing needs to look like over the next 5 years, and then we have our plan.
Yeah.
What I've said to the board is, what we really need is a fundraising plan. That's what we need, is how are we gonna raise the funds for the expenses that we
Exactly. Any other questions?
I don't see any online, but I would ask we wait a moment as
Sure.
people type.
Did you just ask him to share on in chat?
Yes.
Okay.
How many people dropped off this call online? It was 28. Where are we now?
Let's see, we have 23 now.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Emily and Jim say thank you to Arlene and Jeff for making the presentation.
Yes.
And if seriously, if people have questions, you know, you've got a number, there's a lot of ex-treasurers in this kind of, anybody here, former treasurer? Not here, I know even several, and some of them online, I know, and, you know, it is really a community of kind of geeky people who like to talk about, you know, stuff that's in 3.5, so, but, and I think it is really important that people have an interest in understanding of where the money is, where it goes, and how much we need for all these various purposes. Not just to, you know, pay the heat and the lights and the staff, but to save money in reserve for building the 30-year plan for the building. And also just unanticipated things. Thanks for your attention.
We might have one question online. Somebody raised a hand, but we can't actually hear them from online. We can't make it so you guys can hear them.
So I'll ask and relay possibly.
Okay.
So Zoe Myers, did you have a question? I've made it so you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. So first of all, I apologize that my camera's off, but it's not working well. Sorry, I really want to commend the board for that analysis
That's
of
probably the last question because we've got it.
why some things might not have gone as well as we would have liked in the stewardship campaign. I also want to really commend the capital campaign committee and stewardship committee this year because they brought such energy to these campaigns. And I saw a lot of best practices followed that I haven't seen quite as regularly in previous stewardship campaigns. And I really appreciated Reverend Mary saying that what we need is a fundraising plan, which we do. And we need one that isn't just focused on every year stewardship campaign, which I think they're about 6 weeks, 2 months for the stewardship campaign.
Gonna cut you off there, Zoe, because we're running out of time. But thank you so much, and I'm gonna pass on those.
Wait, please don't cut me off. I have 2 more sentences.
Okay,
So
finish them.
I just want to renew my suggestion that our stewardship committee is a year-long committee, which is a point where you can do some long-range planning, where you can see problems coming and not just have a 6-week window to fix them. So absolutely, we've got such energy in this congregation to get this done, and I know that we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Done.
every day.
Well, if we're running out of time, I'll assess.
Okay. Okay, thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you.